You walk down the aisle of any modern department store today, and you are confronted by shelves lined with bright, glossy boxes. Each one contains a pan coated in a slick, dark chemical substance, boasting a newly engineered name that sounds like it belongs in a high-tech laboratory rather than a quiet kitchen. You hand over 40, 60, maybe $80 for it, because the label promises that your morning breakfast will slide right off the surface without a fight. And for the first 6 months, it does exactly that. But then the surface begins to dull. The dark gray coating starts to flake away, leaving tiny, invisible bits in your family's food. By the second or third year, that expensive piece of manufactured modern convenience is sitting at the bottom of a suburban landfill, and you are standing back in the store aisle, wallet open, looking for the next short-lived replacement. Why do you pay for this year after year? How did our grandfathers and grandmothers manage to feed whole households for 80 years without ever buying a second skillet? Let us stop and think about that. You have likely tried the old way yourself. You found a heavy iron skillet at a yard sale or pulled one from the back of a cupboard. You put it on the stove, dropped an egg into the center, gave it a minute, and slid your turner underneath. And it tore. The white grabbed the black iron and ripped wide open. The yellow yolk broke and ran across the metal. And what should have been a clean, beautiful, over-easy breakfast became a jagged, smoking, scrambled mess stuck fast to the bottom of the pan. You stood there scraping the burnt crust with a fork, thinking the exact same thing everyone thinks today. This old cast iron is simply too much trouble. Maybe the modern world is right. Maybe we need the factory coatings. Understand this. You are about to cast aside the finest cooking tool you will ever own for want of 3 simple truths that nobody takes the time to teach anymore. I am Elias Yoder. My people came across the ocean from the Palatinate in 1838, and we have turned the soil, raised our barns, and shared our meals on this same Lancaster County ground ever since. The skillet sitting on my stove right now is older than I am. It hung from a hand-forged nail in my mother's summer kitchen, and her mother used it before that, heating it over dry hickory coals long before electricity ever reached these hills. Today, Esther uses it to fry our eggs most mornings. It has never once seen a factory spray. It has never been scrubbed with modern chemical cleaners. Yet, I will tell you plainly and without a hint of boasting, it is more truly nonstick than any engineered pan you can buy in a store today. There is nothing on it but bare iron and good fat, baked deep into the metal by years of honest daily use. No synthetic layers to scratch off. No forever chemicals that the manufacturers themselves are now quietly stepping away from in their advertisements. Just iron, fire, and fat, the way it has always been. But I must give you an honest limit here before we go any further. This iron is not a miracle worker for a careless cook. If you want a pan you can neglect, a pan you can drop into a basin full of soapy water and leave to sit overnight, or a pan that behaves perfectly when you are rushing out the door in a panic, this method will fail you completely. Cast iron does not forgive haste. It demands your presence, your patience, and a small shift in how you look at the elements of fire and metal. It is a partnership between the cook and the stove. If you are not willing to give it 3 quiet minutes of your morning, then it is better to keep buying the plastic-coated pans. Let us look closely at why that egg sticks in tears in the first place. Most folks believe the problem lies entirely in the seasoning. They think their pan isn't dark enough, or they haven't rubbed enough special oil into it, or they used the wrong kind of fat. So they scrub it down with harsh pads, start all over again, and get the same sticky mess the next morning. The true culprit is almost never the seasoning, it is the heat. More precisely, it is that you are putting your food into the pan before the metal itself is ready to receive. Modern science explains what my grandmother knew simply by daily instinct. If you were to look at the surface of a cold cast iron skillet under a powerful magnifying glass, you would see that it is not perfectly smooth like glass. It looks like a miniature mountain range, full of microscopic peaks, deep valleys, and open pores. When you drop a cold egg into a cold or even a lukewarm pan, that liquid egg runs straight down into those microscopic valleys. As the pan begins to heat up on the burner, the iron expands and those tiny valleys close up like a trap. The iron literally pinches the food, grabbing it in a tight metallic grip. That is why your egg rips when you try to force the turner underneath. Cold iron grabs. My mother taught me a different way at her wood stove, and in 50 years of cooking, I have never seen it fail. Cast iron is heavy, dense, and slow. It does not behave like a thin piece of stamped steel or aluminum that gets hot the very instant the flame touches the underside. Iron takes its time drawing the heat into its heavy bones. But once that heat fills the metal, it holds it steady and unchanging, like a large stone pulled from a hearth fire. That very slowness is its greatest virtue. It creates an even, stubborn heat that does not flinch or drop when cold food lands on it. So the first secret is nothing more than patience. You must place your empty dry skillet onto a steady medium flame and leave it completely alone. Do not add butter yet. Do not add lard or oil. Let the bare iron sit there on the fire and warm through from the very center of the bottom all the way out to the high, thick rim. You must wait until the heat fills the entire body of the tool. You will know the exact moment it is ready when you hold your bare hand a span above the rim and feel a steady, soft column of heat pushing upward against your palm. You might see the faintest, thinnest wisp of steam or a single thread of smoke lift off the dry, dark surface. That is the iron telling you its pores have opened, the peaks have smoothed out, and it is finally ready to work for you. Hot iron releases. Cold iron grabs. Now, I am standing here by the kitchen stove with my mother's skillet. The flame is low blue and steady beneath it. The dry heat is rising against my hand and the iron is completely primed, holding the warmth deep in its bones. In just a moment, we are going to drop the fat into this hot metal. Watch exactly how it behaves. And I will show you the second secret, the secret of nerve, that turns a simple knob of butter into a surface slicker than any factory coating, before we ever let the egg touch the pan. Now, watch closely. The pan is thoroughly heated through its heavy bones, and the bare iron is ready. I take a small knob of sweet yellow butter, about the size of a walnut, and drop it right into the center of the dry skillet. Listen to that sound. It is not a violent spitting screech that turns the fat brown in a second. It is a gentle, steady hiss. On a properly primed iron pan, that butter will slacken and run instantly. It does not pool in one spot. It spreads thin, bright, and liquid across the dark surface, actively hunting the low spots. I lift the skillet by its heavy handle, give it a slow tilt, and let that liquid fat coat the bottom from edge to edge, running up the sides just a fraction of an inch. Understand what just happened here. That thin sheet of hot fat meeting hot iron creates a natural barrier. The heat of the pan pushes the moisture out of the butter, creating a microscopic cushion of steam that lifts the fat away from the metal pores. This is the exact slick surface that the factory pans are trying to replicate with synthetic chemicals. You have just built the real thing in less than 10 seconds, using nothing but a knob of pure butter and a little patience. Now we take our egg. I crack it clean against the side of the hearth and let it drop softly into the center of the fat. The moment it hits, you will hear that steady, comforting simmer. The outer edge of the white instantly begins to turn opaque, forming a clean white frill. And here is where the second secret comes into play. It is a secret of nerve far more than of skill, and it is the exact place where 9 out of 10 modern cooks ruin their breakfast. The second the egg hits the fat, the impatient cook feels an intense urge to be busy. He grabs his turner, arches his shoulders, and begins poking, nudging, and lifting at the edges of the white to see if it is sticking. He forces the metal blade underneath before the egg is ready to let go, and of course it tears. Because he tore it himself. Stop and think about this. You must have faith in the hot iron. Once the egg lands, you must fold your arms, take a step back, and leave it completely alone. Do not touch it. Do not nudge it. Let it sit in that bubbling fat and take its first set. For 30 quiet seconds, your only job is to watch the white change from a translucent liquid into a firm, solid base. Why does this work? When the cold egg first hits the hot grease, it naturally cools the pan down slightly at the point of contact. If you try to move it right away, the iron is still holding on to it. But within 30 seconds, the massive heat stored deep inside the heavy iron base rushes back to the surface. It cooks the bottom layer of the white into a firm, cohesive crust. Once that crust forms, the egg naturally detaches itself from the oil barrier. It is a clean, physical release. Now watch. I take the wooden handle of the skillet, lift it slightly off the burner, and give it a short, sharp jog forward and back, just a little shake of the wrist. Look at that. The entire egg slides as one solid piece, gliding across the dark iron as free and smooth as a sled on hard winter ice. It is not anchored anywhere. It is completely loose. That slide is the iron telling you that it has finished its work on the bottom side. Only now, when the egg is moving entirely on its own, do you take your turner? You do not have to force it or wedge it. It slips under the firm white as easy as a hand into a glove. With one gentle, calm motion of the wrist, you flip it over. We give it perhaps 15 seconds on this second side, just enough to set the top white while leaving the golden yolk perfectly liquid and whole underneath. I bring a clean, cold plate over to the stove. I tip the heavy skillet forward, and the over-easy egg slides right out, dropping onto the porcelain without a single tear, beautiful and perfectly intact. And look at the bottom of the pan. There is no blackened crust left behind, no jagged white stuck to the iron. It is completely clean, saved for a thin, glistening sheen of leftover butter. You could take a dry piece of linen and wipe this pan clean right now without ever touching a drop of water. That is bare iron, and there is no factory coating on earth that can outperform it when it is treated with respect. But our work is only two-thirds done. The third secret is what decides whether this skillet stays beautiful for your next meal or slowly turns into a rusted, sticky frustration. It is the cleaning. How you treat your iron after dinner is exactly how it will treat you at breakfast. The old rule my mother followed starts the very second the food leaves the pan, while the iron is still thoroughly warm. Warm iron is compliant. Its pores are still open, and any small bit of stray food or caramelized juice lets go without a fight. If you set the hot pan aside, sit down to eat your breakfast, and leave it until it is stone cold. Or worse, leave it in the sink until evening. The iron will cool down, its pores will contract, and it will lock that food into a grip as hard as cured cement. For a skillet like this one, where the egg slid perfectly free, the cleanup requires almost nothing. A simple wipe with a clean rag or a square of brown paper, while it is warm, is all it takes to prepare it for the cupboard. But let us say you cooked something heavier, perhaps some thick-cut bacon, and a bit of sweet sugar from the cure has scorched onto the side. You do not reach for a modern plastic scrubbing pad, and you absolutely never reach for a wire brush or harsh chemical soaps. Those things are designed to strip surfaces, and they will tear your hard-earned seasoning right off the metal. The old answer has been sitting in your kitchen pantry all along. A simple handful of coarse rock salt. You throw the dry salt into the warm pan while it is still on the stove, take a folded piece of rough cloth, and scrub the salt around the bottom and sides in a circular motion. The hard, jagged crystals of the salt act as a natural, gentle scouring powder. They are tough enough to scrape away the burnt-on food bits, but because salt is softer than baked fat, it will not scratch or harm the dark protective seasoning underneath. Once the bits are loose, you simply tip the dirty salt into the hearth or the bin, and the iron is smooth again. Now, we must address the matter of water. People today are terrified of letting water touch their cast iron, as if a single drop will ruin it forever. That is a misunderstanding. Water is not the enemy of iron. Standing water and neglect are the enemies. If the pan needs a rinse to clear away the salt or a stubborn juice, you may take it to the pump and run hot water over it. But you must follow the strict rule that comes next. The one that separates a pan that lasts for 5 generations from one that turns red with rust in a single afternoon. The moment water touches your iron, you must dry it immediately and completely. You do not set it in a wire rack to drip dry. You do not leave it face down on a towel. You take a dry cloth and wipe out every visible bead of moisture from the inside, the outside, and the handle. Then you carry it straight back to the stove. You light a low flame, place the dry skillet over the heat, and leave it for 2 minutes. Watch the surface closely. You will see the last invisible traces of moisture, the dampness hidden deep within the microscopic grain of the iron, evaporate into the air as steam. The heat drives the water completely out of the metal's pores. While that pan is still sitting there on the burner, warm and bone dry, you apply the final seal. You take a bottle of good oil, lard, tallow, or a simple vegetable oil, and you add a few drops to the center. I mean a few drops only, no more than the size of a dime. This is where many folks go wrong, drowning the pan in grease, thinking more is better. Too much oil will not cure properly. It bakes down into a sticky, gummy brown film that catches dust and makes your food taste rancid. You take your oil rag and rub those few drops across the entire inside of the skillet, creating a thin, uniform sheen. Then you take a completely dry corner of the cloth and you wipe it all back off again. You wipe it until the pan looks almost dry, leaving nothing behind but the faintest dark luster. You are not building a layer of liquid grease. You are applying a microscopic whisper of oil to seal the raw metal against the dampness of the air. You turn off the flame, let the skillet cool naturally on the stovetop, and then you hang it back up on its nail. It sits there in the quiet kitchen, dark, protected, and completely primed, ready to slide your breakfast around like ice again tomorrow morning. Now, let us step back from the stove for a minute and look at the larger picture. Because once you understand how to handle the heat and the oil, you begin to see why this old way was forgotten in the first place. Who truly profits from convincing you that a piece of bare iron is too heavy, too slow, or too much trouble to keep? It is certainly not the family who passes a single skillet down through 4 generations. There is absolutely no money to be made from a cooking tool that lasts 200 years. The very skillet my mother used to feed 8 children every single day will be handed down to my own grandchildren, and not a single modern manufacturing company will ever earn a copper cent on that transfer. But there is an immense, never-ending fortune to be made from a tool that is engineered to wear out. The bright, flashy pans with the sprayed-on synthetic coatings are sold to you as the ultimate modern solution to a daily chore. They promise an effortless life with no seasoning, no maintenance, and no sticking. But what they do not print on the box is the expiration date. In 2 years, or perhaps 3 if you are exceptionally careful with your wooden spoons, That chemical coating will inevitably scratch, blister, and lose its grip. The pan becomes useless. It is tossed into the waste bin, and you return to the store to buy the newer, upgraded model. This is not a defect in their manufacturing process. Understand this, that is the entire business model. A pan that must be constantly replaced is a product that can be sold to the same householder over and over again for the rest of their working life. A cast iron skillet that outlives the person who bought it is sold exactly once. It is not a conspiracy hatched by men in dark rooms. It is simply a system that rewards the selling of things that fail over the teaching of things that endure. The old people kept their iron forever because nobody was trying to sell them a cheaper shortcut every 6 months, and they knew how to maintain what they owned with their own 2 hands. So, let us look at what we have truly learned today. It is not a collection of complicated rules, but a simple way of living with your tools. First, you must heat the bare, dry iron all the way through before any fat or food ever touches the surface. Remember the phrase my mother used: hot iron releases, cold iron grabs. Give the dense metal those 3 quiet minutes to open its pores and smooth out its microscopic valleys. Second, you must practice the secret of nerve. When the egg drops into that shimmering sheet of hot fat, fold your arms and trust the pan. Give the white its 30 seconds of faith to build its own solid crust and release itself from the metal before you ever think about sliding your turner underneath. If it doesn't slide with a gentle shake, it is not ready yet. Let it sit. And third, you must care for the iron while it is still warm from the fire. Clean it with a handful of coarse salt to preserve the dark, baked-in seasoning. Rinse it quickly if you must, but always dry it immediately over a low flame to drive out the hidden moisture. Finish it by rubbing in a single whisper of fresh oil, wiping away the excess until nothing remains but a dull, protective sheen that shields the iron from the dampness of the room until the next sunrise. If you commit those 3 basic habits to memory, your cast iron will become slicker and more reliable than any artificial coating a factory can produce. And it will do so using nothing but honest iron and natural fat, without a single synthetic chemical entering your kitchen or your body. Now I want to hear from you directly, and I ask this out of an honest desire to learn, because I come to understand the history of our whole country through the stories shared around these methods. Tell me in the comments below, do you have an old piece of cast iron handed down in your family? How old do you reckon it is? And whose hands cooked on it before it came to your stove? And tell me truly, what was the one thing you always believed you were doing wrong with your skillet? I would wager a good sum that it was a lack of heat and patience all along, rather than a failure of your seasoning. I read every one of these stories, and it brings me great joy to see whose grandmother's iron is still working hard to feed a family today. Next time we gather here by the stove, I want to take you out to the old barn shed and find the absolute worst piece of iron you can imagine. I am talking about a skillet that has been utterly neglected for decades, crusted over with old grease, pitted and covered in a thick red coat of flaky rust. The kind of pan that most modern folks would look at for 2 seconds before throwing it directly into the scrap heap. I am going to bring that rusty relic into this kitchen, and I am going to show you exactly how the old people brought a dying piece of iron all the way back to life, using nothing but simple fire, vinegar, and elbow grease, because a rusted pan is never a ruined pan. Iron is incredibly forgiving if you know how to talk to it, and once you see how easy it is to restore a forgotten skillet from the dead, you will never pass up a cheap, ugly piece of cast iron at a yard sale or an auction ever again. You will see the beautiful tool hidden beneath the rust. A good tool is meant to be kept, maintained, and cherished, not used up and thrown away. My mother cooked more than 10,000 meals on the very pan that Esther uses today, and it asks for nothing in return but a little fire, a little patience, and a whisper of oil. The kitchen that sustains a family for generations is the kitchen that remembers how to keep and respect its iron. The people who built our communities with their bare hands understood that truth deeply, and we are only just beginning to remember it today. Before we lay this matter to rest, we must speak on one final thing that confuses more well-meaning cooks than anything else. It is the question of what to cook and what not to cook in your iron when you are just starting out. You will hear many folks on the internet say that you can never let an onion, a splash of wine, or a stewed tomato touch a cast iron skillet because the acid will eat the metal away and ruin your food. Let us stop and think about that. My ancestors did not keep 10 different types of pans in their log cabins. They had an iron pot, a Dutch oven, and a skillet. They boiled, stewed, fried, and baked in the very same vessels for their entire lives. If a single tomato could destroy a skillet, these pans would have never survived the 19th century. Here is the honest limit of that old knowledge. If you take a brand new pan, or one that has just been pulled from a rusty shed and seasoned only once, and you try to simmer a thick, acidic tomato sauce in it for 4 hours, you are going to have a bad evening. The acid will indeed react with the young, thin layers of oil, breaking them down and lifting a metallic, bitter taste into your supper. It won't ruin the iron. Metal is far tougher than that, but it will ruin your dinner and strip your fresh seasoning back down to the gray skin. But if you have an old skillet like this one of my mother's, where hundreds of batches of bacon, fried chicken, and cornbread have baked fat deep into the pores over 20 or 30 years, that barrier is as tough as stone. You can drop your tomatoes in, splash your vinegar, and cook your sauces without a single worry. The iron has been sealed by time. So the rule is simple. Use your pan for frying, baking, and roasting for the first year. Build the armor first, and then you can cook whatever your heart desires. Let us look at another common stumble, the choice of your fat. Today, the stores are filled with highly processed, clear vegetable oils in plastic jugs, and people think these are the best choices because they don't have a strong smell. But my grandfather never bought a bottle of refined seed oil in his life. He used what came from the farm, rendered lard from the hogs, tallow from the beef, and sweet butter from the dairy cows. Modern food science has looked into this, and they found that the old people were right all along. Animal fats and traditional oils contain a high amount of saturated and monounsaturated components. When these natural fats hit the hot iron, they undergo a process called polymerization. In simple words, the heat causes the molecules of the fat to link up, changing from a liquid oil into a hard, plastic-like slick coating that binds directly to the rough surface of the metal. Cheap, highly processed oils often dry gummy or break down at lower temperatures, leaving a sticky film that actually catches your food and causes it to stick. If you want your iron to shine like glass, use real fat. When you fry your morning bacon, do not pour that grease down the drain. Filter it through a clean cloth into a stoneware jar and keep it by your stove. That grease is the very lifeblood of your iron. Understand this as well. A cast iron pan is a living tool. It is not like a modern plastic piece that stays exactly the same from the day you buy it until the day it breaks. Your skillet changes every single time you cook with it. Some days, if you sear a heavy steak at high heat, the surface might look a little dry or dull afterward. Do not let that discourage you. It is not broken, it is simply hungry. You merely clean it with your salt, dry it over the flame, and give it that extra whisper of oil we spoke about. By the next morning, it will be ready to work again. Look at the weight of this pan in my hand. Many folks complain that iron is too heavy for daily use, that their wrists grow tired lifting it from the stove to the table. They prefer the light, flimsy pans they can toss around with one finger. But that very weight is where the magic lives. When you drop a thick, cold piece of meat into a light aluminum pan, the temperature of the metal drops instantly. The meat begins to boil in its own juices instead of searing, leaving you with a gray, tough dinner. When you drop that same piece of meat into this heavy iron, the skillet doesn't even notice the cold. It holds its heat like a blacksmith's anvil, driving that intense warmth straight into the food, locking in the juices, and creating that beautiful deep brown crust that no thin pan can ever replicate. The weight is not a burden. It is the source of its power. So, as you go about your week, I want you to look at your kitchen with different eyes. Look at the things you own and ask yourself, is this tool serving me, or am I serving a system that wants me to keep buying it over and over again? Bring that old skillet out from the back of the dark cupboard. Wipe the dust off it. Place it on the stove, light the fire, and give it the patience it has been waiting for. Treat it not like a disposable piece of modern convenience, but like an old friend who has come back to help you feed your family. It has all the time in the world, and it is just waiting for you to learn its language. Until next time, take care of your tools and keep your iron warm. Let us sit with this thought for a moment before we close our ledger on this topic. You have heard the 3 secrets of heat, nerve, and cleaning, and you have learned how to choose the right fat to build that deep, glassy armor. But there is one final practical hurdle that stands between a cook and a lifetime of smooth iron, and it is something you will see the moment you try to use your turner. It is the tool you choose to slide across the metal. Go into any modern kitchen today, and you will find drawers filled with soft, flexible turners made of black plastic or colorful silicone. People use them because they are terrified of scratching those delicate, chemical-sprayed factory pans. They have been trained to treat their cookware like fragile glass. If you bring those soft plastic tools over to a heavy cast iron skillet, you are fighting with one hand tied behind your backstop. And think about what happens when a soft plastic edge meets a firm egg on raw iron. The plastic flexes. It bends and rides up over the crust rather than cutting cleanly underneath it. It has no edge, no spine, and no strength. My grandfather used a turner made of forged spring steel with a straight, stiff edge and a sturdy wooden handle. It was worn thin at the front from 40 years of scraping against iron, making it as sharp and true as a wide chisel. When you use a proper metal turner on cast iron, you are not hurting the pan. Understand this. You cannot scratch a properly baked-in layer of seasoning with a flat metal spatula. In fact, it is quite the opposite. Every time that flat steel edge slides across the bottom of your skillet, it acts like a tiny trowel, scraping down any high spots, smoothing out the carbonized micro-peaks, and packing the fat even deeper into the valleys of the iron. A metal turner doesn't destroy the seasoning, it polishes it. It grooms the surface until it becomes as flat and even as a sheet of dark ice. So if you are still using plastic on your iron, lay it aside. Find yourself a sturdy, straight-edged steel spatula with a bit of flex but a strong spine. It is the missing half of the equation. Now let us speak plainly about the appearance of your pan, because this is where many people lose their confidence. They look at pictures online or in glossy magazines of pristine, pitch-black skillets that look like they have been coated in dark lacquer, completely uniform from edge to rim. Then they look down at their own stove and see a pan that is dark in the center, a bit gray at the edges, perhaps with a few mottled spots where the fat baked unevenly. They think they have failed, and they want to strip it down and start over. I must tell you honestly, a working skillet, one that actually cooks 3 meals a day for a hungry family, rarely looks like a museum piece. My mother's pan has areas near the top rim where the seasoning is thin, and the bottom has a deep, rugged character earned from thousands of encounters with fire and salt. It is not a showpiece. It is an active kitchen hearth tool. As long as the iron is dry, free of orange rust, and releases your food when the heat is right, the color does not matter one bit. Do not judge your iron by its beauty. Judge it by its behavior. This brings us to the very heart of the old way of thinking. The modern world has taught us to value things that are pristine, effortless, and instantly replaceable. We have become consumers of tools rather than keepers of them. When a tool requires a small amount of understanding, when it asks you to listen to its hiss, feel its heat, and clean it with care, the modern market tells you it is a broken design. They want you to believe that you are too busy, too tired, or too clumsy to live with honest materials. But when you master a heavy iron skillet, you are doing something far greater than just cooking an egg without tearing it. You are stepping out of that endless circle of buying and discarding. You are proving that a piece of simple earth, forged by fire and cared for by human hands, is still superior to the most advanced synthetic chemical a laboratory can produce. You are taking back a small piece of your own daily self-reliance. Think of the peace that comes from knowing that the pan on your stove right now will never have to be replaced. It will not fail you in 5 years. It will not chip or flake. It will be sitting right there, heavy and dependable, when your children grow old enough to stand on a stool and learn how to crack their first egg. It is a steady anchor in a world that changes far too fast. So take these 5 chapters of knowledge and put them to the test on your own stove tomorrow morning. Do not hurry the fire. Do not panic when the egg lands. Clean the pan while the metal is still warm and seal it with that single, quiet whisper of oil. Listen to what the iron is telling you and let it become the finest tool in your house. We have covered the foundation now. The iron is warm, the secrets are told, and your kitchen is ready. Next time, as I promised, we will go out to that damp shed, reach into the dark corner, and pull out that orange-crusted relic of a pan that the world gave up on. I will show you how to break the rust, how to open the iron back up to the sun, and how to lay down the very first layers of new life on a skillet that was left for dead. Until that fire is lit, look after your household, use your hands for honest work, and keep your iron warm.